Hi, I'm Amy, and I love to talk about all things adoption. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about what it is like to adopt after walking through loss. Stick around.
Okay, so what is it like to approach adoption when you've walked through so much pain and loss? And I know for some of you who may be listening, that is your story. You've either walked through the loss of a child, like we have with our child who had heart disease, or you've walked through years and years and years of pregnancy tests that just were not pregnant, or infertility treatments that you've invested your heart, soul, and all your finances into to get pregnant, and it's not happened, or it happened and then failed. And so I realized that walking towards adoption after loss is actually a very common experience. My husband and I longed to adopt well before we walked through loss. We didn't dream that our adoption journey would include loss as well, but it did. And so we lost our son, and we had our older son, Graham, and then we lost our son, Hudson, to heart disease. And then we knew we wanted more children, and we thought we would have more biological children. And I can explain in another video some of why we didn't pursue that, but some of it was health reasons for me, and some was also we didn't want to risk the possibility of having another critically, potentially terminally ill child. So while we had adoption on our hearts long before any of that knowledge, it kind of sped up the process for us to pursue adoption. So the journey was emotional. And I think that adoption is emotional no matter how you approach it, because you're either kind of shifting gears from pursuing a biological child, or even if you felt called to adoption for forever and you already have biological children, it's still a changing of gears for your family. You are pursuing, now you're pursuing all the financial piece of adoption. You're probably rearranging your home. You are rearranging your schedules for home study visits, and you're really rearranging the things that are the priority of your heart. Because for us, we sat with an empty nursery with a crib up for nearly 2 years. And so that, I walk past that room constantly. It ends up becoming like a storage closet when you want it to have a baby in it. So it really affects you on all levels. And that is true regardless of whether you're walking into adoption after loss or not. But that is the case, that when you pursue adoption, just like if you were pregnant, you have an end goal in mind of that your family is growing. You may not have an exact timeline, like when you're pregnant, it's 40-ish weeks. You may not have that with adoption, but you start thinking through Christmas, how old will the baby be? Or will the baby be here, with adoption? All the timelines, maybe we won't take that family vacation because we don't want to be, in Hawaii if we get a call for an adoption in Kansas. So everything comes through the lens of walking through when you're approaching adoption. Everything kind of shifts gears in how you prioritize your life. What is different about approaching it with loss? And I think that I'm going to speak from my own personal experience because I know that everyone is different. For our family, the very first meeting we had and kind of an info session we went to was actually the same year our son Hudson passed away. And that might seem a little crazy or soon. But for us, Hudson, we knew he was sick during pregnancy, and we thought that he was going to live, but there was also chances the whole way through that we would lose him. So we were grieving for a long time. Even just grieving that he wasn't healthy. Even if he had lived, bar some crazy miracle, he would have always had medical challenges to some extent. And so the grief was there, and no matter what's going on in your life, if you want more children, those things are still coming up in conversation. And so I remember there were a few select times that my husband Corey and I talked through what would it be like to have more children or adopt, even while Hudson was hospitalized. And so, so those desires were there to have more children, even in the midst of such hard things. For us, we just did the info session. We also have friends and family who have adopted, and we knew it could take a long time. And so we were like, let's just see what's out there, see what the process is like for us, see what we need to do. And we also knew that we needed to raise funds. So we went to that first info session, and then we went to a one-on-one, like I went to kind of represent Corey and I went to meet with our social worker, who ended up becoming our social worker. And that was the same year we lost Hudson. We fast forward, we got a lot of information, a packet of materials that we reviewed, but it really was a number of months even still before we actually pursued the process of adoption and home study approval and all of that. In fact, we weren't actually active with our agency for almost another year, just under another year. So although we had pursued the process, we really did wait and did a lot of grief work between counseling and grief classes that we did through our church that was phenomenal. If you're in Chicagoland walking through grief, I really hope you'll check out what they offer through Willow Creek. It's called Rebuild. And I realize if you're not in the area, that's not applicable. But if you are, and Chicagoland is huge, people would drive well over an hour to attend these free courses. And so I hope that you will check those out. I think they do offer some things virtually, so you might be able to check that out if you are not in the Chicagoland area. I can't speak more highly of that program. And it's 100% free, and you're put together with people who have experienced similar losses. So if you are walking through loss, if you're looking for a kind of advice, that's the thing, is you got to do all the hard work, right? And that's besides adoption. It's hard work. Grief is hard work. It's heavy. There's a lot to it. And I would say too, like, even if it's not like, the loss of a child, if you're kind of having to shift gears in your heart from going through pregnancy, and that you realize that may not be part of your story, and you're shifting gears towards adoption, that's grief. Just call it what it is. It's grief. It's death, a death of a dream, a death of something you envisioned for your life. And so do some grief work, find someone who's walked ahead of you. I'd be happy to be one of those people. Please reach out. Our journey continued. We went active with our agency, like I said, almost a year after that initial kind of meeting. And, it took months to get all the home study stuff ready. You have to pull all your finances, and you have to pull lots a lot. I will go into it. If you want to know what a home study is like, you can let me know that too. And I can kind of walk you through that, so you're not kind of unaware of what it is like. In terms of emotionally, I do think we were ready. We also knew again that we still had more time to invest in our grief journey, because we also knew that we more than likely would not go active and get chosen right away. And in fact, we didn't. We had a 2-year wait. And in that time, we did continue pursuing counseling and grief classes. And I even started to lead some groups there and taught there, because it was so powerful for me, and shared it with my husband as well. So we had the time to invest in our own hearts and souls to do some of that hard, heavy lifting of grief. And the reality too is that once you adopt, I think there's kind of maybe a misunderstanding that, oh, well, you've adopted, so the grief is gone. And that's true whether you've walked through failed IVF or you're walking through secondary infertility, or whether you've gone through the 5 million shots with IVF and it's not worked, or whatever, the Clomid and all the stuff. If you're walking into adoption and you've experienced all that loss, it's not going to just dry up and go away, just because you've grown your family through adoption. So it didn't for us anyway. And I would say, even though now I have 4 kids, counting our sweet Hudson in heaven, and I never dreamed I would say that. Never in a million years would think I would have that many children. And I am they are amazing kids. Just amazing. Now we're in the throes of the diapers and bottles and being woken up at night. So it's not easy, but what a blessing we have in these children. But I still miss our son. I still recognize he's not here. And the grief is not linear. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's phases of grief, and here's, start with anger, and you kind of go through denial and anger. I can't remember the order, but honestly, there's not really an order. It kind of circles around. And that is true even in the midst of waiting to adopt, in the adoption process, and now having them, they're ours, So I hope that this is a little bit helpful for you to know that like being an adoptive parent after loss is awesome. You know, nothing makes loss okay. Nothing can replace your child. And it's one thing that I think, you know, maybe people could misunderstand. But like, it is utterly impossible to replace a child. I mean, Hudson had his own personality, his own look. He was only 8 months old when he passed away, but I promise you, he had a very distinct personality. And my other kids aren't like him. You know, Graham isn't like Avery, and Avery's not like Hudson, and Hudson's not like Isabella. They are all really different, even as babies. And so I just think it's a misunderstanding to think that, and even people have said, oh, look what God has done. And, and I do believe that God takes things, brings beauty out of ashes. He's so good at that, isn't he? Only God can take beauty from something like death and make something so horrific beautiful, but at the same time, these rainbow babies that I have do not diminish the fact that we've walked through hell. And so I don't say that to be negative. I say that to recognize my own loss and permanent loss in this world, in this life. That is a permanent loss. And at the same time, the incredible joy that adoption has blessed our family with. And I say it also, again, not to be negative or to downplay the beauty of adoption, the complex beauty of adoption, but also to just honor your story if you're listening to this, having walked through whatever your loss story is. And if you would be so brave, I would love to hear. Give me a comment or two below and tell me who you are. Are you waiting to adopt? Are you have questions about adoption, and what are they? Because I'd love to, if I know them, or if I don't know them, I'll do the research and find out the answers that might be helpful to you as a hopeful adoptive parent. And then if you've walked through a loss, that you would be willing to tell me, that you would share below just a tiny bit of your own story, because I think it's powerful, and I wish you would reach out to me, because I feel like it's one of the things that has helped me the most is talking to other families who walk through tragedy and pain, and also adoptive families. Those two things have been so incredibly powerful. So thank you so much for checking out this specific video about what it is like to adopt after walking through profound loss. And you're on my heart, because if you're listening to this, you probably have walked through your own series of losses, and I'm here for you. Again, so I'm Amy Sylvestre, and I hope that you'll come back and find me on Instagram. I'd love to know who you are. And if you have questions about adoption, you can ask me there or comment below. Please come back. We are a family who has walked through 2 adoptions in the last 2 years. Again, I'm here for you, and I do this content not for me, because it's good for me. I enjoy doing it because it gets my thoughts out, but it's also for those who are so excited about adoption and ready to seek that process. And you have questions, and I hope as an adoptive mom, I could be helpful to you. So please come back. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.